Steve Perry, a voice that could soar above stadiums, pierce hearts, and linger long after the last note faded. He became the unmistakable sound of Journey, the man whose melodies turned into the soundtrack of a generation. Yet behind the glory, behind the sold-out arenas and screaming fans, there was a story few truly knew. A story of longing, struggle, and the hidden costs of being one of rock's most celebrated voices. From the very beginning, Perry carried a rare intensity. His devotion to music was matched only by the weight of expectation, both from himself and the world around him. Every performance demanded perfection, every note carried emotion, and every success brought with it an undercurrent of pressure few could comprehend. He was the voice of passion, but his own heart often bore the strains of a life lived in the relentless glare of fame. And then there was Journey, a band that would elevate him to iconic status, yet also challenge him in ways that would shape the rest of his life. The camaraderie, the music, the triumphs, they were intertwined with tension, fatigue, and personal cost. Behind the music that millions adored lay decisions, sacrifices, and truths that would remain unspoken for decades. This is the story of Steve Perry, of his rise, his devotion, and the reason he eventually walked away. Steve Perry was born in Hanford, California, in January 1949, into a family that recognized early the quiet spark of his musical talent. From childhood, he carried a sense of determination and intensity that set him apart from others. Music was never just entertainment for him. It was a refuge, a way to process emotions that often felt too large for words alone. The first time he sang in front of others, it was more than a performance. It was a declaration of who he was and who he wanted to become. Growing up, life was not always easy. The challenges of adolescence, the search for identity, and the pressures of fitting in weighed heavily on him. Yet music provided clarity. He poured himself into every melody he heard, every harmony he imagined, practicing relentlessly to perfect what seemed effortless to those around him. It was in these early hours, alone with his voice and his guitar, that he cultivated a precision and emotional depth that would later define his career. In his teenage years, Steve joined local bands, performing in small clubs, community events, and any venue that offered a stage. Each performance was a lesson, each mistake a step closer to mastery. It was during these years that he learned the delicate balance between raw emotion and technical skill, a balance that would become his hallmark. The road was not glamorous. It involved long drives, empty rooms, and nights when applause never came. Yet the struggles only strengthened his resolve, teaching him that talent alone was never enough. It had to be nurtured with patience, dedication, and heart. By the late 60s, Perry's name began to circulate among regional musicians and producers. He had a voice that could captivate without theatrics, a presence that drew people in not through showmanship but through authenticity. Every note carried the weight of experience, and listeners sensed it. Even in these early performances, there was an honesty to his singing, a rawness that resonated with anyone who had known longing, uncertainty, or the quiet ache of ambition. People could relate to that vulnerability because it mirrored the struggles of everyday life, the desire to be seen, to be understood, to leave a mark on a world that often overlooked the quiet. It was also a period of self-discovery. Steve experimented with songwriting, learning to translate feelings into lyrics that were personal yet universal. He observed the world around him closely, the joy of small victories, the sting of setbacks, and the moments that often passed unnoticed by others. His music became a reflection of this world, a bridge between private emotion and shared experience. In doing so, he cultivated a skill that many aspire to, but few achieve: the ability to connect deeply with an audience without losing his own sense of self. These formative years laid the foundation for everything that was to come. The long drives, the late nights, the sacrifices, all contributed to a voice and presence that would later carry millions through arenas, radio waves, and recordings. It was in the quiet dedication of these early days that Steve Perry became more than a talented singer. He became a storyteller, an interpreter of emotion, and a man capable of transforming personal struggle into something that others could feel, relate to, and carry with them long after the song ended. Steve Perry's path led him from small stages and regional clubs to a crossroads that would define his life. By the early 70s, he had gained attention for his voice, a combination of power, clarity, and vulnerability that made listeners lean in, as though he were singing just for them. When the opportunity arose to join Journey, a band on the verge of breakthrough but still searching for its signature sound, it was a moment that combined timing, talent, and destiny. The audition was intense, both exhilarating and nerve-wracking, and Perry understood immediately that this was a chance to step into something bigger than himself. From the moment he joined, there was an electric chemistry. The band members, each with their own style and vision, found in Perry a voice that could unify their sound while carrying its own distinct emotional weight. Rehearsals were rigorous, sometimes tense, as differing personalities collided in pursuit of the perfect performance. Yet beneath the challenges there was an undeniable connection, a sense that together they could create music that would reach far beyond the rooms in which they practiced. For Steve, the work was both exhilarating and humbling. The road ahead demanded not just skill but endurance, compromise, and heart. The first albums with Journey showcased a voice that could soar over the most intricate arrangements while still conveying intimacy. Perry's emotional authenticity resonated with listeners in a way few could match. Every lyric, every note felt lived in, as though he were revealing a piece of his own life, a reflection of universal experiences: hope, longing, desire, and doubt. Audiences responded instinctively. Tickets sold out, radio play surged, and the band began to capture the attention of a growing fan base. For Steve, it was a heady combination of affirmation and responsibility. The voice that had once been confined to small clubs was now carrying millions of expectations. Offstage, life was just as complex. The pressures of touring, recording schedules, and public scrutiny were intense. Long hours on the road tested friendships and patience, and the demands of success sometimes created friction among band members. Creative disagreements were inevitable, yet they were also part of a process that pushed each member to reach higher, to refine their craft, and to confront both personal and professional limitations. For Steve, these challenges were not just obstacles, they were opportunities to understand himself and his role within a collective, to learn the balance between individuality and collaboration. The human side of this period is often overshadowed by charts and accolades, yet it was just as significant. Steve experienced moments of profound connection with fans, quiet reflections in hotel rooms, and private triumphs that felt as meaningful as any public recognition. The intensity of these experiences, the combination of exhilaration and fatigue, forged a deeper understanding of what it meant to dedicate oneself to something larger than personal ambition. The successes were exhilarating, but the lessons learned during long nights, missed homecomings, and personal sacrifices were what shaped his character and artistry. Steve Perry had transformed from a promising vocalist into the defining voice of Journey. He had navigated the intricate dynamics of a growing band, contributed to a sound that would soon become iconic, and discovered the joys and costs of fame. The stage was set for global recognition, chart-topping hits, and sold-out arenas. Yet beneath every applause and every milestone lay the pressures, compromises, and quiet moments of doubt that would eventually shape the most difficult decisions of his career. The journey had begun, and with it, the foundation for a story of triumph, vulnerability, and human complexity was firmly in place. By the late 70s and early 80s, Journey had reached heights that few bands could imagine. Steve Perry's voice had become the defining element of the group's sound, carrying their music to the top of charts and into the hearts of millions. Arena tours spanned continents, each night a mix of bright lights, roaring crowds, and the exhilarating thrill of achievement. The music was no longer just a craft. It had become a bridge between personal experience and universal feeling, allowing listeners to hear their own hopes, desires and fears reflected in every note. Yet beneath the triumphs, the demands of life on the road weighed heavily. Endless hours of travel, recording sessions and rehearsals left little room for rest or reflection. Relationships outside the band were tested, moments of homecoming often missed, and the unceasing expectations from fans and the industry added a constant undercurrent of strain. Steve, who had always poured himself fully into his craft, found the exhilaration of performance mingled with fatigue, a push and pull that shaped both his art and his personal life. Within the band, creative friction occasionally emerged. Differing visions and ideas sparked intense discussions, revealing the complexity of collaboration under pressure. Steve, known for precision and commitment, often carried the responsibility of balancing perfection with human connection. These moments, while challenging, also pushed the group to refine their sound, encouraging growth and deeper understanding among the members. It was a demanding process, one that required both patience and emotional insight, yet it strengthened the music in ways that audiences could feel. Even amid these challenges, Steve's relationship with the audience remained intimate and profound. Fans were drawn not just to the soaring choruses, but to the authenticity in his delivery, the raw emotion that seemed to reflect their own experiences of love, longing, and loss. Every concert became more than entertainment. It was an exchange, a shared space where listeners felt seen and understood. Steve understood this responsibility and approached each performance with care, aware that the music carried more than melody. It carried human truth. The era of acclaim also highlighted the personal sacrifices required to maintain such success. Long stretches away from family and friends, the constant need to deliver excellence, and the pressure of public attention tested both endurance and resilience. Moments of doubt and exhaustion arose, prompting reflection on the sustainability of a life lived entirely in the spotlight. Yet through it all, Perry's dedication to his craft and the emotional honesty in his performances never wavered, revealing a deep commitment to art that extended beyond fame or recognition. By the peak of their fame, Journey had become an international phenomenon, and Steve Perry's voice had taken on a life of its own, emblematic of emotion, yearning, and human connection. Yet the story behind the music, the isolation, the fatigue, the sacrifices, and the search for balance, remained a defining part of his experience. These years of success, with all their exhilaration and strain, laid the groundwork for reflection, introspection, and the eventual realization that personal well-being and creative fulfillment sometimes demand difficult choices. As Journey continued its meteoric rise, the pressures behind the scenes quietly mounted. The relentless cycle of tours, recordings, and appearances created an environment where even the strongest bonds were tested. Steve Perry, who had always given himself fully to the music, began to feel the weight of exhaustion pressing against both his body and spirit. What had once been a source of inspiration was becoming increasingly demanding, a reminder that success often carries an unseen cost. Within the band, creative differences emerged more frequently. Each member had a vision for the music, and while collaboration had produced their most celebrated works, it also led to tension. Discussions about song choices, arrangements, and performance styles sometimes turned into disagreements, highlighting the challenges of balancing individual expression with the collective identity. Steve, who had always sought to uphold both artistic excellence and emotional authenticity, felt the strain of navigating these competing priorities. The personal toll became more pronounced over time. Long periods away from home, the constant scrutiny of fans and media, and the pressure to deliver on expectations began to erode the joy that had once accompanied performance. Steve found himself wrestling with fatigue, uncertainty, and a longing for balance that seemed increasingly elusive. The music remained his passion, yet the pace and intensity of life on the road were leaving him depleted, questioning whether the path he had chosen was sustainable. There were also quieter moments that revealed the depth of the challenge. Perry experienced the bittersweet reality of performing for thousands while feeling disconnected from the life he had left behind. Relationships outside the band required sacrifice, and moments of personal reflection became rare. These experiences illuminated a profound truth: no amount of acclaim could replace the need for rest, personal fulfillment, or emotional well-being. For Steve, this realization was both sobering and necessary. By the mid-80s, it became clear that a choice had to be made. The drive that had propelled him to the top of the charts was now at odds with his need for stability and peace. Walking away from Journey, a band that had defined so much of his life and career, was not a decision made lightly. It involved confronting the tension between personal health and professional obligation, between the joy of music and the fatigue of constant performance. Yet the decision was ultimately an act of self-preservation, a recognition that continuing at the same pace would come at too great a cost to both his creativity and his humanity. Despite the departure, the connection to the band and its members remained complex. There was respect for what they had achieved together, gratitude for shared experiences, and acknowledgement of the bond formed through years of collaboration. The choice to leave was not born from resentment, but from the need to honor one's limits and preserve the ability to create authentically. Steve Perry's exit was a turning point, both professionally and personally, marking the end of one chapter, while leaving space for introspection, growth, and the pursuit of a life defined by balance rather than obligation. Ultimately, the story of Steve Perry and Journey is not simply about fame or chart-topping hits. It is a story of human endurance, of the struggle to reconcile ambition with well-being, and of the courage required to step away from even the brightest spotlight. His decision to leave the band reflected an understanding that true artistry is not just about performance, but about living fully, preserving one's voice, and embracing the emotional truths that guide life beyond the stage. Steve Perry's journey with the band that would become a global phenomenon was marked by triumph, devotion, and undeniable talent. His voice carried emotion in a way that few could replicate, turning songs into stories that resonated deeply with listeners. Behind the stage lights and applause, however, lay a human story of exhaustion, compromise, and the quiet struggle to maintain balance in a life defined by relentless expectation. Leaving Journey after decades of success was not an act of anger or disillusionment. It was an act of self-awareness and courage. Perry recognized that sustaining his artistry and well-being required stepping back from the very spotlight that had defined him. It was a choice rooted in honesty, reflection, and the desire to preserve both creative integrity and personal peace. His legacy endures not only in chart-topping hits and iconic performances, but also in the human truth embedded in every note. Steve Perry reminds us that the pursuit of passion demands both dedication and self-care, and that sometimes the bravest choice is knowing when to let go. For more emotional stories, check out this video.